the intention of this video is to connect with you, connect with anyone who follows me on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram or is on my email list, and just connect and also answer your questions about pain, posture, flexibility, mobility, doing the splits, whatever you are into. That's what I'm here to help you with. So I asked last week on my social media if people had any questions about injuries or pain or posture, flexibility, mobility, and I got a couple that I want to answer. But if you happen to be on this live video, either now, if you come on it live, or if you watch this recording later, let me know two things. One, where are you from? I want to know where in the world I'm talking to you from. And two, do you have a question? Do you have a question about something going on with your body, or some flexibility goal you have, or some mobility thing you're working on? And even if I don't catch it on this live video, I'll come back to the recorded video afterwards and interact with you and answer your questions. So let's get started. Oh, and by the way, if I've never met you before, I'm Shane from gotrom.com, and I help people with fixing injuries and getting flexible online. So let's get into it. So some of the questions that came in, Nest of Kim, someone named Nest of Kim on Instagram, asked about instability of the sacrum, kind of low back area, and over flexible joints. I think that person is working on their splits and they're experiencing an unstable sacrum and over flexible joints, which it sounds like might lead to some pain. So I actually have, if you go on my YouTube channel, Got Rom on YouTube, I have at least one or a couple videos about what to do if you are hypermobile, if you're hyperflexible, but you're still in pain. So if you just search hypermobile on YouTube, then you'll find a sequence that I put together where you can strengthen your joints, your hip joints is what the video is about, in all different planes and directions. Because sometimes if your body is trying to get flexible and you're doing the splits and you're experiencing some pain, it's because your joint is kind of bonking around, for lack of a more technical term, and that's causing your pain. And that will actually shrivel up or shut down your range of motion. So sometimes people that have very loose joints, and maybe they used to be flexible, will all of a sudden become very inflexible because the body is guarding itself, it's protecting itself. So paradoxically, if you create some stability in your joints via strengthening your glutes and your hamstrings and your high quad attachment points and things like that, then that'll help out a lot. So check out that video on YouTube. Hope that's helpful. The other part of her question, his or her question, about the instability of the sacrum is the sacrum, very small little tiny joints in your low back, and they don't really get unstable just for no reason on their own. Very often it's actually a downstream problem. The hip joint, which is just below the sacrum, is either not mobile enough, usually is the situation. So the principle of the body is if one joint is not working as it's supposed to, meaning the hip is not mobile enough, then the joint upstream, the little SI joint, sacroiliac, will move more than it should. And that creates this instability in the low back. But usually it's big brother, the hip joint, causing the problem. So if you're experiencing sacroiliac joint instability, of course, work on strength training and stabilizing using your muscles. But if you're lacking range of motion in your hips, then you might have to improve your mobility. And when the hip, the ball and socket joint, is moving as it should, then the SI joint becomes more stable. That's something that I personally dealt with a couple years back. So next question. Nina Rateri on Instagram and someone named Comfort Zone Challenge both asked a similar question about inconsistent training or not having enough time to practice. So if you're finding that you kind of are training your flexibility or mobility and you kind of go in fits and spurts, you start, you stop, you start, you stop, obviously take a look at why that might be. Maybe you're feeling pressured for time at work or who knows what. But what I've done personally, whenever I notice that I'm slacking or I'm not being as consistent in either my training or something else is I try to get leverage on myself. And what that means is try to find a way of incentivizing myself to do the right thing when my willpower alone won't cut it. So one thing that I've done is had accountability buddies, accountability partners, and given myself consequences and rewards. So let's say I wanted to train for the splits, but I'm being inconsistent. I make a promise to my friend, I'm going to follow this splits training program or work on my splits 5 days a week for 1 hour each time, 5 hours a week. I'll report to you every week if I do that or not. And if I do not, I will burn $20 cash. That's actually something that I've done multiple times. And it's surprisingly incentivizing to, if I think, if I don't do my training, I'm gonna have to burn a $20 bill. I've actually never had to do that, even though I've done that multiple times over the years, because for me, it's like just the feeling of just wasting that money is just like, I can't possibly do that. So that's one way, is getting leverage on yourself with an accountability partner and some kind of consequence, and maybe even a reward. If you actually do what you said you were gonna do, you keep up with your 5 hours a week splits training or mobility training, give yourself a reward at the end of all of it. So hope that's helpful. Next question, we got Larry XCI. He wants to find a balance between his stretching practice and his Olympic weightlifting practice. He says that the days after lifting, his muscles always feel super stiff. So yes, this is something that I also personally did. I used to be an Olympic weightlifting coach in a CrossFit gym, and I was really interested in improving my flexibility and mobility, which are kind of competing goals. So what I ended up doing is, after like a heavy day of training squats and Olympic lifting and things like that, you'll find that you're really sore, and then it's really hard to make progress in your mobility. So I would stack my heavy training days with my heavy mobility days, because if you're training for the splits, for example, the next day after splits training, you might be really sore, like you just did some weightlifting. So if you say do your splits mobility training in the morning and your Olympic weightlifting in the evening, you're stacking your really intense exercises that create a lot of DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, and you'll be really sore the next day, but you'll have that whole day to recover. So in track and field, they call this high-low training. So you stack all your really intense stuff on one day, and then you have a very low kind of recovery day the next day. The alternative is if every day is kind of pretty intense, then your body never really has time to recover. So personally, I found that my recovery is better if I have very intense days like splits training and Olympic weightlifting, and then really low days with lots of recovery on the next day. And it doesn't have to alternate high, low, high, low, high, low. It might be high, low, low, high, two kind of low days where you're doing either very light training or active recovery or light mobility or something like that. So hope that was helpful on how to balance stretching and Olympic lifting. Multiple people asked about pain at the hamstring attachment point. So at the ischial tuberosity, kind of like the under butt, there's a really great stretch therapy teacher named Laughlin, who's a great guy and I've learned a lot from. And he refers to this ischial tuberosity area as the under butt, which is a very apt name. It's kind of right under your gluteal fold. And a lot of people experience a lot of pain there, and it can be a variety of reasons. Hamstring tendinitis, tendinosis could be related to femoral acetabular impingement, something that I have and that I help people with, aka hip impingement. The things that I found most helpful are to learn how to do very targeted tissue work exactly in and around that area. So right on that kind of hamstring attachment point where it blends in with the adductors, right underneath that kind of the bony prominences, the sits bones, they call them in yoga. So you can get a softball and you can put it on a hard box or a chair and try to massage that area. There's an exact body positioning that's best for this. I actually have at least 2 videos on YouTube. If you search hamstring or hamstring attachment pain or ischial tuberosity or something like that on my YouTube channel, you'll find exactly how to do this. But it's basically, you're sitting in a chair, a softball underneath your hamstring attachment point and you're trying to massage around in that position. Hard to visualize, but it's easy to see when you see it on YouTube. The other thing is sometimes the hamstrings are working overtime because your glutes are not working. So if you are finding that your glutes, your hip rotators, your kind of the rotator cuff of the lower body is not stabilizing the hip as much as it could, or it's not assisting hip extension, like every time you run and your leg trails behind you, the glutes and the hamstrings perform that motion. But because a lot of people sit a lot and they have very tight hamstrings, or not hamstrings, very tight hip flexors from sitting, their glutes kind of shut off, gluteal amnesia or underactive glutes. So lengthening your hip flexors, firing up your glutes will ensure that the hamstrings aren't performing double duty for the glutes. So really getting into fixing anterior pelvic tilts, activating your glutes, but then taking that into functional movement like squatting, lifting, running, and learning how to do that all really precisely will make sure the glutes are doing their job and make sure that the hamstrings aren't working overtime and possibly kind of causing some fraying or some overactivity at the hamstring level. If you're someone that's dealing with FAI, it can be a little bit more complicated. You might need to check out our FAI Fix program to have a comprehensive approach, not just kind of one quick massage, one quick stretch kind of thing. So give those ideas a shot. Search for hamstrings on my YouTube channel, and I hope that is helpful. Let me see what else I got. Nitilesh BC says, I want to stretch daily, but muscle soreness kicks in. So I assume what this person is talking about is that they're stretching every day, but then they become too sore and maybe they kind of stagnate. So again, it kind of comes down to kind of the Goldilocks principle, learning just enough. When I first started stretching and doing mobility, I thought that, you know, every time I stretched, I had to get deeper and deeper into the stretch. And therefore I was always a little bit sore. And when you're sore, your body kind of shrink wraps itself. So a better approach would be to do that high-low training, to have your more intense days and then your lighter days. In my 30 and 45-day programs on gotrom.com, for the intense programs like pancake middle splits, front splits, things like that, where you get really sore from stretching, I call it like your deep stretching days and then your light limbering days. So you're still stretching and doing mobility work every day, but you're alternating in that high-low fashion, and therefore I think your progress will be a lot better. So I hope some of these questions and answers were helpful to you. If this seems helpful for people, I'll keep doing it. Just looking for more ways to connect with you and answer your questions. So even if you watch this recording afterwards, leave me a comment. Let me know where you're from. Let me know if you have any questions. We can chat, and see you in the next video.
Yeah.